There's a question that I think is really good coming from the Patreon community here, from someone named Alex, and I think it goes really well with the video from your friend Lindsey Graham, Scott Ritter, because he was on Face the Nation recently.
What did Trump do to get the weapons flowing? He created a loan system. They're sitting on $10 to $12 trillion of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That $10 to $12 trillion of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin $10 or $12 trillion of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous.
So that's what Lindsey Graham had to say. The question, though, from Alex, I think provides a good contrast that you can provide insight into, Scott. He said, when will Russia know that it has won the special military operation, and what are the specific objectives for Russian victory? Now, this question is a good one because according to Lindsey Graham, one of the specific objectives is to essentially take Ukraine's wealth and, of course, hand it to its best friend, China. But what's the reality, Scott?
Well, I think we, first of all, need to reflect on the reality that what Lindsey Graham says is reflective of an overarching policy posture by the United States when it comes to Russia. Go back to the early 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Russia that emerged from that. It's one of the ugliest periods of Russian history, and I would say it's one of the uglier periods of American history too, and indeed the history of the collective West, because rather than extending a helping hand to Russia, we put our foot on Russia's throat, and we helped install a very weak, corrupt leader named Boris Yeltsin, whom we exploited. In fact, all this talk about about Russian interference in American elections that turned out to be false. In 1996, America got Boris Yeltsin reelected, and it was such an egregious affront that Time magazine even made it a cover, as best election money can buy. So we stole an election in Russia, gave it to Boris Yeltsin for the purpose of keeping Russia politically weak, and to steal mineral resources from Russia, from the former Soviet Union. But there was an overarching objective of breaking Russia up into its constituent parts. This is what the Chechen conflict was all about. It was a CIA-backed operation designed to promote succession movements, to get the Muslims of the Russian Federation to rise up against. It wasn't just designed in Chechnya, that they were hoping that a successful Yanks to the rescue, there it is, that the successful secession of Chechnya would lead to a similar withdrawal from the Russian Federation by Tatarstan, and maybe Bashkiria and other Muslim entities, and this would lead further to the breakup of Russia, the Far East breaking in, Siberia breaking away. Russia would become not a singular federation, but actually turn into a series of independent states who are weak and could be easily controlled and dominated. This was the strategic thinking of the United States, which is why we're so mad at Vladimir Putin for not playing the game and for stepping in and building a strong Russia. But so Lindsey is right when he reflects on this. But let's talk about what he says about Putin. I mean, apparently Lindsey knows Putin very well because he can speak on behalf of Putin and Xi Jinping. Lindsey's wrong. And is this me just saying this? He said, she said. Guess who the she is? Not me. Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. I just don't like Lindsey Graham. That was a very crude thing for me to say, so I apologize. But Lindsey Graham, I don't like him. He is implying that it was Putin's strategic objective to strip these materials, this material wealth away from Ukraine. We know that's a lie. Why do we know that's a lie? Well, there's this thing called the Istanbul Communique. Let's look at let's look at some of the mineral wealth that he talks about. One of them is lithium. Now, I'm not the world's smartest person, but I do know that lithium is a key component in the production of batteries, electric batteries that play an important role in, creating electric cars, et cetera, in the future. And that the nation that controls lithium production is going to be in the driver's seat when it comes to producing electric vehicles. And China, has sort of the corner on the market. And I think you'd be foolish to say, well, let's let China get control of everything. So I understand the intent there, but the Istanbul Communique was going to return. There's two places where these lithium fields exist in economically viable quantities. One is in Zaporizhia, one of the oblasts or territories of the new Russia that's been taken over by Russia. But Zaporizhia was going to be returned to the Ukrainians. Now, if the Russians wanted to keep those mineral resources, Lindsey Graham said, why is Russia giving Zaporizhia, with one of the largest exploitable lithium fields in the region, back to Ukraine? It shows that Lindsey Graham's a liar. The second place is Donetsk and the Donbass. Those fields are actually more viable because I guess it's easier to extract the lithium from these fields. But again, the way that the Istanbul Communique was structured is that Russia couldn't speak on behalf of an independent entity, and the Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk had declared their independence from Ukraine through referendums that took place on the eve of the Russian initiation of the special military operation. So Russia said, look, it's independent, but what we guarantee is that we will work with Ukraine and the international community to hold referenda on the future of the Donbass. Will it opt to return to Ukraine with its rights guaranteed? Will they opt to be independent, or will they opt to join Russia? What Russia said is there's no foregone outcome here. We will, let the will of the people, in accordance with the United Nations Charter, play out. But Russia, that's not how you operate if your goal is to seize control of lithium fields and transfer this to China. So Lindsey Graham is just making stuff up. He's literally manufacturing a case out of thin air. The facts don't back up what he says. It's not Putin's intention to steal this material. It's just stupidity on Lindsey Graham's part. But then again, we're talking about Lindsey Graham, and pretty much everything he says and does is stupid.
Indeed. And lastly on this, maybe, Scott, if you could just talk about, not a lot has been spoken about in terms of the battlefield. If you could give a quick summary on the battlefield, because I feel like a lot of this escalation ladder climbing that NATO is doing, and a lot of the commentary you hear coming out of the U.S. political class does have an kind of an air of desperation. But yet Bloomberg, I saw a report recently saying that, well, Russia's so-called offensive that it's waging right now in Kharkov and other areas of the front line, time is coming up soon because the billions of dollars of weapons that were promised to Ukraine from the United States are on their way. So maybe a quick summary on the reality there.
I'll just postulate this for your audience. Okay, let's say I'm Ukraine, and I've taken a couple bad blows. I'm bloodied, but I'm trying to slow down the battlefield to receive weapons, and then I'm going to use those weapons to alter the outcome on the battlefield. When I gather these weapons, is it better that I use them the way that I want to use them based upon a plan that I've come up to achieve the results? Or as the weapons come in, do I immediately send them to battlefields on the front line that are picked by Russia, that Russia's determined this is where the fight's going to be? and therefore I lose control of these assets. They're taken out of my hands as they come in. They're gone. They're on the battlefield. Oh, I've lost control. Russia's controlling the battlefield. That's what's happening here. Russia is creating the circumstances in which it dictates how Ukraine is going to use these weapons that Bloomberg talks about. Ukraine's not going to be able to assemble them into some sort of strategic reserve. Right? Ukraine is going to have to immediately send them to the battlefield based upon what Russia is doing. And what is Russia doing? Russia, again, Vladimir Putin talked about this. That's why I always encourage people to attend the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. If you can't, to at least monitor it and listen to what the Russian president has to say. But he said some interesting things, including that Russia could win this war very soon, but it would require massive offensive operations that would kill a lot of Russian soldiers. He said, we're not in the business of killing a lot of Russian soldiers. We don't, that's not what we want to do. It's also interesting, just as a little tangent, that Putin hinted for the first time about the level of Russia's casualties. And he speaks of what are known as irretrievable losses. These are dead and wounded to the point that you can't be returned to the battlefield. If you threw out a number, say 500,000 irretrievable Ukrainian losses, some people, myself included, would say there's more than that. Others would say there's less. Let's just call that a happy middle ground, 500,000. Russia said that it's 1 to 5, that for every 5 Ukrainian irretrievable losses, there's 1 Russian irretrievable loss. That means 100,000 Russians have become irretrievable losses. This in a war that's just slightly over 2 years in length. The United States lost 58,000 men in Vietnam over the course of 10 years, and that broke our nation, broke our back. We lost the will to continue the fight. But the Russians are getting stronger. If it took 2 years to have 100,000 irretrievable losses, understand that Russia is gaining recruits at a rate of 50,000 a month in some cases. 30 to 50,000 a month are joining to be trained to come and fight in the special military operation. So even if the Russian losses are high, and 100,000 is very high, the Russia's making up for it. Russia can continue to fight. What Putin is saying is we don't want to. The modern war is bloody enough as it is. We don't want to do things on the battlefield that cause Russians to die. We prefer to cause the enemy to die. And again, 500,000 is a lot of dead or irretrievably lost Ukrainians. So Russia's goal has been to advance where you can, but where the Ukrainians decide they want to fight, then to push, stop, dig in, and then initiate the meat grinder operation. Bring in the fab bombs, the guided bombs with the wings that fly in and hit targets. The aircraft never have to reach the forward edge of the battlefield. Artillery supremacy, missile supremacy, drone supremacy, and basically grind the Ukrainians down so that you've now created what we've seen in the past, the Bakhmut effect, where the Ukrainians commit to a battle, and then in order to prevail in the battle, just keep pouring resources in until 90,000 troops later, they're out of resources. Or we can talk about the Avdiivka effect, another battle where the Ukrainians just kept pouring in resources until they ran out of resources. In both battles, Bakhmut and Avdiivka, once the Ukrainians ran out of resources, they had to retreat, and Russia advanced and took that territory and then continues to advance slowly. What's happening in Kharkov? Russia opened up a northern front. The purpose of this front ostensibly is to create a buffer zone. But the Russians advanced as far as they could without over committing the offensive and losing people. They advanced as far as they could, and now the Ukrainians have rushed reinforcements in, and they've frozen the lines. But that's to Russia's advantage, because now Russia is involved in meat grinder operations. And now we have a meat grinder taking place there. We have another meat grinder taking place in Donetsk. We have another meat grinder taking place in Zaporizhia. And as these weapons come flowing in with whatever limited manpower Ukraine is able to mobilize, the meat grinder is consuming them based upon Russia's initiative, not Ukraine's. And guess what? And now the Russians have opened up another front near Sumy. Now another meat grinder. There's talk about Russia opening up, a front in Kherson. You have the Ukrainians actually evacuating Kherson now because they can't defend it. They don't have troops. And so, Russia could be going back there. The bottom line is Russia is going to build meat grinder operations all along the front. So Ukraine throws in its resources, grinds them up. And then when they're out of resources, Russia does what it does. It keeps advancing. This is inexorable. It can't be stopped. It's proof positive that, Russia is winning. And even with all this new NATO equipment and stuff, it's not enough. Basic military math shows that Russia is accumulating military power every day that this war goes on. They're gaining more strength than is being lost on the battlefield by a significant number. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are losing more strength on the battlefield than is being replenished, even with this NATO assistance. So no matter what, the disparity between the two forces is the gap is just growing even larger in favor of Russia. So that's what's going on. I'll leave you with this thing. Putin has always been saying that the calendar doesn't drive this operation. That, we're not talking about victory by this month or by this month or by this month. Victory happens when victory happens. Victory is defined by denazification, getting rid of all of the Banderist supporters in the Ukrainian government, to include the Zelensky government and anybody affiliated with him. The Russians have sought to isolate Zelensky politically, both at home and abroad, by questioning the constitutionality of his mandate. But it's so they're attacking Zelensky domestically, but they're also attacking Zelensky abroad, basically saying that this is a man who doesn't represent the Ukrainian people, that this is a dictatorship, etc. And the implication that Putin gave is that he expects Zelensky to stay in power through this year into next year, and that next year he believes that this problem will go away. But if you've built denazification around removing Zelensky and his government, and you're saying it's going to take another year, I think Putin just told us something there, that he's in no rush to win this war. I know I've quoted Russian generals who've told me, no, the battlefield's changing in May, it's going to be decisive, and then you're going to see even bigger map changes. But I think that they may have made those statements assuming that they were going to do big arrow operations. And the Russian government has said, we don't have a mandate. We have a mandate to win. We don't have a mandate to win at any cost. And we're not going to do these big arrow operations, which now only 23% of the Ukrainian energy infrastructure is up and running. And even if the war stopped today, they wouldn't be able to get that infrastructure up and running by wintertime. One can definitely understand that in what's left of the summer season, that Russia is going to try and reduce that 23% to as close to zero as possible, so that Ukraine is facing a disaster when wintertime comes. And if it's a harsh winter, Ukraine may not survive as a nation. And that's part of Russia's strategy. Remember, Putin said, I'm not in the business of killing Russian soldiers. We need to preserve as many Russian lives as possible. So we're going to do things that puts maximum pressure on Ukraine to willingly go to a table and say, yes, we're ready to surrender. So that's my take on the battlefield. It's a bloody meat grinder operation where Russia is in control. But Russia is not committed to any timeline. Russia is committed to accomplishment of objectives. And again, the fact that the United States and Europe are pouring money into Ukraine, it changes the game. It's a game changer. It doesn't mean Russia loses. Russia's not going to lose this war, but the game has changed. New realities have come into play that Russia has to adapt to. And so I think Russia's strategy is a strategy of patience and perseverance. Just wait and let the situation develop in a way that's to the benefit, exclusive benefit of Russia. And in this case, that means that the Russians are killing far more Ukrainians than can be replaced. And the Russians are ensuring that whatever replacements they bring in exceeds the number of Russians that the Ukrainians are killing.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.